Welcome to Michigan Atheists Speak Up. I'm Sean Sherman, and tonight we're going to be discussing a very special issue with Arlene-Marie, Director of Michigan Atheists. We're going to be discussing the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, the Pledge is an issue that is very complex and divisive, and I originally thought it was going to be simple, but there's a lot of various legal issues and other implications for our society. Arlene, would you like to give us a general introduction to the Pledge and its history with Michigan?
Well, maybe I'll just start with the Pledge. Yeah, let's talk about Michigan. For years and years here in Michigan, of course, we've been saying the Pledge. Our children, school children, public school children have been saying the Pledge. We adults say the Pledge at almost any public event we go to, it, or so it appears. But the charming part of the Pledge over the last few decades has been that, especially in our public schools, the school districts were able to make their own decision if they wanted to offer the Pledge or not offer the Pledge. Teachers were able to make the decision, no, I don't want it in my classroom, or yes, I do want it in my classroom. But what happened last year is that here in Michigan, our Michigan legislators came up with a mandate mandating that every public school in the state of Michigan had to offer the Pledge every day of the week and have a flag in every classroom. So that option has disappeared for the schools and for the teachers. So now we have what can be called a mandatory pledge in our public schools. And this is a very disrespectful thing for our legislators to do. It's disrespectful because they're not taking into consideration the cultural and religious diversity of our students in public schools. There are lots of children in our public schools who are not citizens, and that's fine, because a person is not required to become a citizen to live out their lifetime in the U.S. So, but certainly those children who are not citizens shouldn't be saying the Pledge. Also, we have families that they're concerned about their children being forced or being mandated or demanding that these children say a pledge, when the parents know that the children are, first of all, minors and really can't make pledges of any nature, and secondly, the children are being forced to make pledges that they're not often old enough to even understand the abstractions of the pledge.
Arlene, isn't mandatory pledge recitation illegal here in the United States?
Well, the Supreme Court ruled on that in the 1940s, stating that the Pledge of Allegiance can be offered, but it cannot be made mandatory. No one can be forced. No adult,
Correct.
No child, no one can be forced to say the Pledge. Furthermore, the Supreme Court, or the courts, not the Supreme Court, but other courts, revisited the Pledge a year later and added to it that no one can be asked to stand for the Pledge, because they opinioned that standing is the same as speech, which I think we all understand is.
Absolutely.
If you're asked to stand in unison for this particular thing, and you do stand, you have just taken the Pledge, whether you wanted to or not.
Because it violates the Conscience Clause of the First Amendment, as well as the 14th, correct?
Well, yes, absolutely. Another reason that children should not be saying the Pledge is not only because they may not be citizens, or maybe their parents don't want their children involved in things that they're too young to understand, but there are also those families, those kids that are growing up in secular homes, and the parents may object to the Pledge of Allegiance. So, and I might like to add that the Pledge, the under God part of the Pledge of Allegiance, is not a religious or a non-religious issue. It's a constitutional issue. And it is unconstitutional to ask a child or an adult to believe in a deity as a test of citizenship or allegiance. It's unconstitutional. So that answers your constitutional question.
Certainly.
You simply cannot ask anyone that question because you do not have to believe in a deity to become or be a citizen of this country.
So there are many groups that have issues with the pledge, from
Many.
Jehovah's Witnesses and various religious
Oh,
groups.
there are many religious groups that have
To secular
That's
families.
another family that shouldn't be taking the pledge. Kids that shouldn't be taking the pledge in school because, yes, there are many religions, such as Jehovah's Witness, that faith prohibits these types of pledges.
Correct.
So in the end, what we end up with is mandating something in our public schools that is divisive, disrespectful to the culture, multicultural, multi-religious attitudes of our pupils, and we hand down a complex problem that becomes a big problem for parents, children in schools, and it's cost a small fortune in courts, lawsuits.
Correct. So you said that the solution offered by the court was an opt-out solution.
Yeah.
Does this solution really solve the problem? When you have small children that may not even understand what they're doing because they haven't reached the age
Right,
of intellect yet,
Right.
and we know that from the psychologists
right.
and scientific studies,
Yeah.
does opting out really work?
No.
So why is that a solution, and how is that working out in Michigan? If we're going to mandate that it's necessary, do we at least have to offer the opt-out solution, and how do you implement that?
Wouldn't you think that if a group of adults who represent a legislative body in Michigan, if they wanted to mandate something that involved minors, children that we all struggle to protect. We never want to do anything to children to make an example of them, to set them up to be bullied, to be set apart. This is just not what we want to do, but that's exactly what the legislative body did in Michigan. They set forth a mandate, and of course, saying in the fine print in the bottom line, but of course nobody has to do it. You can opt out. Well, all these parents that we just talked about and all these children who would like to opt out, if this was your child, would you want to go and say, I don't want my child to say the pledge, and make it set your child aside?
I would expect a lot of social ostracism, and there's a
Absolutely.
multitude of issues that seem to crop up. What about...
If anyone thought the Pledge of Allegiance was that important, wouldn't anyone address equal time to opt-out protections and solutions? How can you mandate something that's so dangerous
One would hope.
and not make provisions to protect the children?
Absolutely. It strikes me as a potential method of indoctrination
Oh, absolutely.
could cause many parents to be alarmed. I'm interested in the history of the pledge, and I know that you have experienced the pledge in school when you were young.
Yeah.
And I think that it was different than when I said it as a child. The pledge apparently was created by a man named Mr. Bellamy. Would you like to
Francis
give us some
Bellamy.
information on where
Francis
it came
Bellamy
from?
was a Baptist minister, and he was a socialist Baptist minister, and he was kicked out of the ministry because of his socialism. Although he's always had a warm spot in my heart because I'm a socialist, and Francis Bellamy did agree, and I agreed on several things. Equality is very important to socialists, and it was very important to Francis Bellamy. So when he wrote the pledge, and I'm sort of putting the cart ahead of the horse here, but he wanted to have the pledge end with equality, although he knew he could not put that word in the pledge because the National Board of Education would never approve that word equality because African Americans and women were not seen as equal in 1892. So the word equality could not be in the pledge, and so that's a huge insult, of course, but that's the way it is. Well, anyway, when Francis Bellamy got kicked out of the ministry, then he went to work as an editor for a magazine called the Youth's Companion. It was a popular children's juvenile magazine at the time, and he became an editor there. And the guy who was the marketing manager of the Youth Companion, together he and Francis Bellamy started talking about, let's have a celebration to celebrate the 400th birthday of Columbus coming to the Americas. So okay, they decided that they would do that. And then they had to get the permission from the National Board of Education that the Youth's Companion magazine was going to be the sponsor of this celebration. And so, okay, they got that permission. Well, now they had this going. So now how about we write, Francis Bellamy got the idea, okay, I'm going to write something for the school children to say, so it feels like they have a voice in this celebration. And so he wrote the pledge. However, the marketing manager for the Youth's Companion, he was a lot smarter than that. He said, I'll tell you what, if we're going to say this pledge on Columbus Day, then we should have a flag, because that's who we're pledging allegiance to, the flag.
This is where they
So there should be a flag at all these public schools. So here's what we'll do. We'll sell the schools a flag at cost, as long as they buy a subscription to the magazine. And it worked. It was a beautiful economic business transaction. In 1 year, 25,000 public schools in America in 1892 or 1, 25,000 had a subscription to the Youth Companion and a flag.
A brilliant marketing ploy.
There you go.
And I understand that in your time, when you said the pledge, there was something called the Bellamy Salute.
Oh, yes. Yes. I don't
you
know
go
how
into
that evolved, Sean.
What that is, or?
I can do the salute. How this evolved from celebrating this on Christopher Columbus Day to all of this every day, everywhere we go, to where it is today. I mean, it's like it's there. But it also, beyond the words, came this big thing. So, on command, children immediately stood up at attention on command. And on command, outstretched our arm. And on command, up went the palm. And we said the pledge. Then we turned our hand over on command. We did everything except goose step. So when the Supreme Court ruled on the legality of mandating the pledge, which of course he said you couldn't mandate it anymore, it was voluntary. They also said, no, we can't do this anymore, this needs to be changed. And that did stop somewhat, although there were all kinds of other things that took place. But I don't think it was till in like the 1950s that our federal Congress instituted the hand over the heart.
Okay, that is the position that I remember as a child growing up in the 80s.
Hand over the heart. Oh, yeah. Well,
we had our hand over
you're
our
just
heart.
A kid.
And I don't remember any other types of salutes. And to be honest, some of those seem rather dark in a way. They remind me of totalitarian regimes from other countries.
Yes.
Where we see that the pledge seems to have been morphing into a tool of patriotic indoctrination.
Yes.
Which seriously looks problematic to me.
And feels very un-American.
That it looks
very
un-American when I've seen that motion.
Americans were so upset when we saw in newsreels and later on TV children having to, and adults, people having to organize to take loyalty oaths not only in China, in Russia, and in Germany, but we were furious about it. And yet, we were sending our own children off to school every day to do exactly that. And we still are. And as adults are still flocking to things, and when they're asked to stand up to say the pledge, they do.
Yes.
And one wonders why. I haven't stood up or participated in the pledge for more years than I can remember, probably more than 50 years.
Certainly, and it's difficult to not notice the mixing of religion with patriotism. Maybe not back in the 30s or 40s, but later in the 50s, they added the phrase "under God" to the pledge. And now we see a mixing of religion with politics and patriotism, and seeing this mandated.
I thought it was interesting. I ask myself here in Michigan, when our legislative body wanted to mandate this pledge, are they wanting to mandate the pledge because, as they say, they really want our children to understand patriotism at a young age? However, reasonable people say, but you can't teach patriotism.
Of course.
Patriotism is learned. So I don't think I'm buying the Michigan legislative's excuse for this mandate. I think I'm more tempted to want to buy the fact that they want to mandate religion in our public
Certainly,
schools.
and they have a history of doing it. The actual phrase was suggested by a Michigan legislator.
Correct.
Am I correct?
That's correct. Michigan can take the credit for writing the bill that was presented to Eisenhower regarding adding the Pledge of Allegiance to under God to our Pledge of Allegiance. It came from Michigan.
Yes.
Michigan
His name
bill.
was Mr. Oakman, was it?
Oakman, correct, a Republican representative from the state of
we are
in
to blame.
1954. And that is the exact bill that Eisenhower signed. And you know, if I may, I brought along with me, here is exactly what Eisenhower said when he signed the bill. He said, "From this day forward, the millions of our school children will daily proclaim in every city and town, every village and rural schoolhouse, the dedication of our nation and our people to the Almighty. In this way, we are affirming the transcendence of religious faith in America's heritage and future. In this way, we shall constantly strengthen those spiritual weapons which forever will be our country's most powerful resource in peace or war." Now, it doesn't sound to me like adding "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance
No, it certainly doesn't.
has it had any reason other than combining, other than government endorsing religion.
Certainly, and I think many people would ask, which religious faith is the one that's going to be espoused? Is it the Christian faith? Is it the Muslim faith? Is it the Wiccan faith? There are so many different religions that one is left with the question of which faith is going to be the one that gets to be enshrined into these types of practices. And I think that's where the most problematic parts of the pledge seem to be.
Absolutely. We start from the very, if you and I just go backwards with this whole thing, doesn't it just seem obscene, insane? I don't even know if I know the right word to describe it. But why would you mandate something that nobody has to do?
That is another question that I was asking myself. If we're going to allow opting out, why not remove the pledge from mandatory practice in our schools? It doesn't seem that it offers anything to the students.
There are many teachers and many parents who feel that the Pledge of Allegiance has no educational value. It really doesn't teach the history of the birth of our nation.
No, the children could be repeating all sorts of things without even understanding it. And I don't think that they understand concepts such as patriotism, the flag.
And that's right.
Or
Children
what God is being
are
represented.
just beginning to be able to develop abstract thinking somewhere around 12, 13, 14 years old. They don't understand the abstracts in the pledge. But what it is divisive. And so what happens to a child who opts out in the average public school? What happens? Since our legislative body, no one has made protections here. They just mandate these crazy things and say you can opt out, but boy, if you do, you're going to really be sorry. Well, children were spanked. They were disciplined. They were kept after school. All kinds of things happened. Then it sort of evolved. They lost all these court cases. It started costing a lot of money. So then the school started trying to deal with it, like have the opt-out kid go stand in the back of the room, go stand in the hallway. Well, they started making examples. All those cases that went to court cost the school districts and the teacher big money. My personal favorite is the school teacher or the school district who says, yes, for anyone who doesn't want to say the pledge, just stand there. We already know the answer. Off to court we go, and you lose, because you can't ask anybody to stand for the pledge, because it's speech.
It does seem like a lot of these easy solutions might actually open up our public schools to legal liability.
Oh, it has, and it has cost our public schools. I mean, there probably are more court cases than I could ever cite in the time limit that we have if I had double that time limit. There's probably a court case going on somewhere in America at this moment as we speak regarding the subject that we're discussing. It's a can of worms.
Definitely. And our schools are already strapped for cash as it is. And fighting those lawsuits must be very expensive.
Oh, it is very expensive.
I was wondering why have the pledge at all, and to have to go through with these lawsuits and spend money that we should be spending on the children.
Yeah, exactly. Think of the things that we could mandate. Think of the things that we could do that are not divisive. Could we figure out a way to start our school day with our children in something that it creates unity, a desire to learn, rather than starting the school day with things that are divisive, things that are these children who know they shouldn't be doing this or can't be doing this are forced to. This is an unfair burden to start a kid off with every
I would
morning.
have to agree with you.
It's an unfair burden to adults. I know that no matter where I go, I of course never stand for the pledge. And so I hear the rumblings around me and I'm like, have you not figured out that the Pledge of Allegiance was written for children in a juveniles magazine, probably for profit by the magazine? It evolved because maybe we have control over people, if we have them do the Bellamy salute and pledge allegiance to a nation or a flag or whatever, and then later on we add God to it. You know, indivisible under God. How can those three words be put together? Someone who doesn't understand or who can use those words, indivisible, under God, doesn't understand separation of state and church.
Yeah, I think we can all conclude that our children don't need to be subjected to ideological repetitions with religious elements to start their school day. I would like to ask you about what the federal courts decided in Michigan
Oh, in 1960.
The Michigan federal courts.
Yeah, the Michigan in 1965. Do we have? Yeah, 1965. The Michigan federal courts, Michigan federal courts. Well, the Michigan federal courts ruled that in the state of Michigan, someone may offer the pledge or songs. What are those songs called? Anyway, as long as the people are made aware, everyone is made aware that it's voluntary. We never hear that word voluntary.
So the court's decision is that it must be voluntary.
It must be voluntary, and we need to make that clear to adults who go to a football game, who don't want to sing patriotic tunes or don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. They're free to ignore that. Sit there and ignore it. Children who go to school are free to ignore that. But that's what we need to work on socially,
Okay.
especially
it's good
to
know
protect
that
our
the
kids.
bottom line is that it's voluntary,
Oh, yes.
irregardless of whatever legislation comes about
Oh,
to
yes.
try to mandate it. It's definitely voluntary,
Yeah.
and the personal conscience choices of Americans, especially here in Michigan, are protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to thank Arlene for coming on Michigan Atheists Speak Up.
Thank you.
And I think we've all learned a lot about the pledge and the issues concerning our state. Thank you.
Thank you.